And we're back with another episode of Today and Tomorrow in Scottsdale. I'm Don Henniger, and joining me, as always, is my podcast partner and man who knows good art when he sees it.
I do.
Kevin
I
Maxwell.
do. I got an eye.
You do. Your eye is sharp,
it.
man.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, so your eye took us to this guest today. So,
That's true.
Your eye is proven for sure. It's interesting. Scottsdale, we talk about this all the time. It's known as an arts destination, arts and cultural destination. And with us this week is one person behind the curtain. What I think is cool about our guest today is we get to tell the story of one artist who came here because he knew about Scottsdale's art reputation. Now here he is, full-time, living here, doing artwork and adding to our reputation as we move forward. So fantastic. Our local artist is Kirk Russell. Kirk, welcome. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, gentlemen.
So what I like about Kirk's got a wonderful story, and we'll talk about that in a second. But just for some background, Kirk is a mixed media artist. He creates composite images with acrylic paints. It's a blend that's based on Kirk's knowledge of film and digital photography, traditional painting, and graphics technology. I think that's really cool how that all comes together.
Yes, especially nowadays.
Yeah. So the story that I really want to hear, though, because I know a little bit about this, I want to hear some more, is you started as a photojournalist, near and dear to my heart, as a newspaper man for sure, in Connecticut. Then you went into semi-retirement, and you ended up in the British West Indies. Then you had a hurricane happen there, and suddenly it blew you all the way over here to Scottsdale. So tell us your story.
Well, basically, I started off after I graduated college, and I was a photojournalist, which I just loved. It was just a great business. I was in what I consider to be the sweet spot of photojournalism in those days, because you could go in and pick up your assignments and pick up a car, and you had a camera, and as long as you covered your gavel passings and usually sports and usually one other thing, advertising, you were good. And I just loved it. And back in those days, the photojournalist, if he sold a picture to the Kiwanis, because they all wanted one going in and they all wanted one going out, you got to keep the money and you got to do it on the newspaper's material.
Right.
So it was not only enjoyable, it was fun. And I worked with a newspaper that had a tabloid. So I got to do the centerfold a lot. And I just loved it. It was all enterprise stuff. I go get kids, eating ice cream, what have you. So then that led me to my business. So as being successful in that, people hired me for other things. And so I ended up with my studio, which was Rusell Studios. And we ended up being very successful in the fact that I ended up with 3 other photographers that worked for me and a couple secretaries. And I retired basically when I was about 48 years old and went sailing for a few years.
Wow.
But while I was working, one of the things that I did is because I did a great job with the state police and the government, I got a high security clearance. And so if things would come along that had a high security clearance, they go, oh, get a hold of Rusell. He's got a high. And so if a job came up, I kept getting a higher security clearance. So I ended up photographing nuclear submarines. I ended up photographing, in fact, I did one, probably one of the highest paid jobs I ever had, was a nuclear power plant, Millstone. It was in a pissing contest with GE. And they were saying GE wasn't their turbine blades were falling apart. And GE was saying, no, you're not filtering your water properly.
Not a healthy thing in a nuclear power plant.
Yeah. And so, then they get an arbiter, okay? And the arbiter said, we need somebody that's got a high security clearance. So they called me, and the guy called me in and said, look, here's the deal. I understand you're the photographer in the area for this and on the East Coast. And I said, yeah. And he said, well, here's the deal. We're probably going to own your equipment. And possibly you're not going to be able to finish the job. So I hope you can work fast, because your equipment picks up radiation quicker than the body. So you're going to have a dosimeter, and your equipment's going to have a dosimeter. And we need to open up these turbines. And so I had to photograph forensically.
Wow.
And I didn't have a whole lot of time, because, these things are like $250,000 every half an hour that this thing is down. And they had to open it up for me. So it was probably the most pressure job that I ever had.
For sure.
But it turned out...
You're still glowing.
Well, and it turned out great. And it was the highest day rate I'd ever been paid, because some of this stuff, it's for the government or something. You can just pretty much charge whatever you wanted to. But I never forget the reason it became profitable is after I delivered, I went into K&L Lab in New York City to get the proofs and everything done. And then I delivered them. And the guy's going through it and he goes, oh, I want that one. I want that one. So he did about 50 pictures. And as I'm walking out the door, he said, oh, Kirk, he says, one of the things, I just count this. I said, we need 3 for our attorneys, 3 for their attorneys, 3 for this, 3 for that.
150
Yeah,
or
well,
whatever.
it turned out to be a whole lot.
Yeah.
And for custom prints back then, it was like $50-$60 a piece.
Wow.
So it added up pretty quick.
That's a heck of a payday.
Yeah, it was about $19,000
Yeah,
for the
that's
day's
a great
work.
boat.
man.
So back in the early 80s, that was a lot of money for
It
anybody.
was, yeah.
So that was an interesting deal.
Yeah, for sure.
And then I photographed 2 sitting presidents. I photographed Nixon. I photographed Carter. Yeah, I had an interesting career.
Wow.
You know, it's interesting when you talk about photojournalism. I mean, in all my newspaper career, I always thought the photographers had the most unique jobs. They could go to be first on the scene for instance, when there's something happening, but they also had shoots. And once in a while, I would have to take a camera, particularly in the second paper I worked for back in Pennsylvania, in hunting season, when somebody killed a bear or a deer, they'd bring it to the newspaper office. I'd have to go down and snap a shot of him with the deer or her with the bear or whatever. But the benefit of that was the trays of wild game meat that they would deliver to say thank you to us. Bear, venison, pheasant, rabbit.
Wait.
Whatever.
Wait.
Just a little sampling all that back in Pennsylvania days. Yeah.
Why would they bring an animal they brought the animal to the newspaper?
The dead animal. They wanted a picture with their kill, with their
Why? Because
their
there's
game,
nobody else take a picture back then?
and we put it in the paper.
Okay. Okay.
It was like, this is small town newspapering now.
I was just saying,
so
check out my big kill, my game I got.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
Okay.
And they took pride in that. And I don't know if they still do that or not, but in today's day and age, it's more challenging being a photographer because now they expect reporters to go out with their iPhones.
Oh, they do.
And take pictures when they're on a scene.
Yeah.
So they're not necessarily accompanied by a professional photographer anymore.
Yeah.
They're being trained to take pictures with their iPhones.
In fact, I don't think they are really. It's got to be something really important to
the big assignments.
Exactly. The journalists have their own iPhone and they're that has changed. I know whenever it switched over, the president of the lab that I did business with, I used to play golf with him. So he said, he says, you coming back into the, I said, yeah. He said, why don't you come in? He said, we'll play some golf. So I walked in. The gal said, you know where Greg's office is? I said, yeah. So I went in there. He said, come on. He said, let me show you the lab. So I said, well, I've been here before. He said, not like this. So we went back, and if you can imagine a Walmart, okay, and you walk in, the whole place was empty. There was not a thing there. And he just bought $1 million worth of Kodak printers and stuff the year before.
Wow.
And he said, we just had no idea that digital was coming that quick.
And look what it did to the industry.
And so his whole business was run out of 3 offices this size.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he was still in business, and they do a good job and stuff. But
some of the folks in the old traditional photography business didn't see it coming.
70% of all photographers have gone out of business.
Yeah.
Period. And it's become a commodity because we used to do $5,000 in prom season at an event, and now the people go, oh, my parents will take this, or it's good enough, or the commercial work.
I got my phone.
Exactly. And to be honest with you, it is good enough.
Yeah.
I can, with this iPhone 15, I can take a raw picture and I can blow it up to any size here. Now, the great thing about photography is that the software is such now that even with a standard picture, you can go in and change it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can think it, you can create it now.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times I'll go ahead and do a photograph. I will paint it digitally. I literally have a canvas that I can paint digitally. And then I take that and then I go ahead and put paint to it after that's done. Okay. Or I do different mixed media work. Sometimes I just do strictly a painting. And then a lot of times for duplicates, I do giclées. And around the world, 80% of the artwork that you see are giclées now. They're not a giclée. A giclée is the closest thing to an original painting. It looks like an original painting. I'll give you an example. It's actually printed, okay? And as long as you finish it off in a particular finish, okay, and different artists have different way they finish it off, you really can't tell that it's not a painting. I mean, 90% of the people, I'll give you an example.
Is there texture to it? Or?
Yeah, but just like it's a painting. I mean, I can put as much texture on one of my pieces as anything that you see or more. And I'll give you an example. I won in Connecticut for a portrait painting, and I was down in the Caribbean at the time, and I had two of them. I had a giclée because the person wanted two, for one for his family and then originally for himself. And my secretary ended up putting the one in this contest, the state contest, the giclée, and I won. And I wasn't going to go down there and say, "Oh, this really isn't an original painting. This is a giclée."
Oh, wow.
So
Close enough.
It's
You
just
fooled
that
some
good.
judges on that one, huh?
Pardon?
You fooled some judges on that one.
Yeah. And so it's that good.
Wow. That's
And
neat.
I do, obviously a lot of my original paintings and stuff are sold in people's homes or what have you. But I do a lot of giclée work now. And, I could put an original and a giclée next to it, and 90% of the people couldn't tell the difference.
So how did you, just, I want to finish your story for a second, because it was one of the cool assignments you had. I knew about the nuclear plant, reading a little bit about your background, but you also had a job taking some photos on some pretty fancy yachts.
Yeah.
What was that all about?
Yeah. I ended up, when I was down in the Caribbean, the photographers just didn't have, the local photographers just weren't sophisticated enough. I knew them. They were nice guys. But it's a different attitude down there. It's kind of like, well, if we get it done tomorrow, if we show up, it's island life. And you have to kind of live it to understand it.
I wouldn't mind island life right now,
right.
actually.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, I loved it. But the hotels, I had a reputation for showing up if they had something that needed to be done, or a client that wanted a portrait or a painting or what have you. So when this yacht broker called me up, he said, "Hey," he said, "You still doing any photography?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Occasionally." I said, "A lot of painting and stuff, but yeah, I still love to do photography." He said, "Well," he said, "I need some yachts photographed." And I said, "Well, what for?" He said, "Well," he said, "the yacht owners, okay, they have to charter it out 3 weeks a year to take as a tax deduction. So we have to do some photographs, interior and exterior." And I said, "Yeah, sure." So I had to be on these yachts, 150-foot yacht, for a
Wow.
week. And myself and Beverly, my sweetie pie, this love of my life, we go out on one of these yachts, and, these things charter out for thousands, tens of thousands of dollars a day, never mind a week.
That's a
You get a free
vacation.
ride.
And I had the whole staff there, and they were at my disposal because we had to go out. I had to photograph them at night. I had to photograph them during the day. I had to photograph in the interior. She was my model a lot of times. Okay. And then I had to go up in a little Bell Jet helicopter that they would park in a lagoon or something, and they'd take all the toys out. And I'd have to go up in the Bell Jet helicopter and photograph the yacht with all the toys. And it was just a great deal. In fact, I say to young people, go to a place called Dock Walk. It's all around, I think it's at Lake Havasu now.
Mhm.
But if you want a summer job, or you don't want to go right out of college into work, you go to this Dock Walk, you get certified in the 2-day course for at sea safety, and you can apply because these big yachts are looking for young people to be on them. And so, they give you a 6-month contract. And you have your own stateroom, you get paid, you get fed. And if they like you, then they say, when we go over to Monaco or up to Newport, here's a month off while we take the yacht across the big pond,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll fly you over there.
Yeah.
And I know people that have done it for 3 or 4 years before they finally get into their career.
Well, good
Kev,
job.
we
on that
missed our
point.
calling,
I know, right?
especially when you were a kid, because I did a bunch of crazy summer jobs on the Jersey Shore and all that kind of stuff. Had I known that was available,
Yeah.
that would have been interesting.
That's why I say to people, it's just not that difficult. So they're always looking if they like you. Because basically, when the first yacht I photographed, I walked in, there were all golf bags around there.
Mm-hmm.
And all these guys were scratch golfers because the owners only rented it out 3 weeks a year. Okay.
Right.
And then they'd use it a couple of weeks, and then maybe give it to their family member. But the rest of the time, they wanted these yachts to be known. And so the people who worked on the yacht, they'd get up and they'd have to wash them down in the morning, get all the salt off them. And then if you had to go run for provisions, or if there was the engineer needed some parts, you'd go into town or whatever. There was the time these guys just played golf. In fact, I was talking with the head chef, and I said to him, just out of curiosity, how'd you get this job? He said, I was a chef at a restaurant in Miami. And that's where they come in to kind of do a redo on the boat before they take it across the big pond. And he said, the guy liked my cooking and said, would you like to be the chef on the yacht? So I asked him about it, and he told me about the 3 weeks and what have you. And the guy said, well, I just can't work for 3 weeks or, a couple of months. He said, no, no. He said, I'll pay you. And he paid him a huge salary. And I said, he said, I just love it. He said, because I'm down here with some of the best chefs in the world. And he said, and I said, well, what's the biggest problem? So I like to say, what's the biggest problem? They say, I'll tell you what the biggest problem is. He said, these guys, we do the work in the morning. All they want is just some fruit salad or something simple. At noontime, they want some tuna fish or something easy. And I said, in the evening, they want to go have dinner at the Salty Dog with their their friends. And I said to the
cake.
Yeah, I said to the captain, he said, I have to practice my profession. These guys have to eat dinner here at least 3 days out of 7.
Take us to the British West Indies. How did you end up there?
How did I end up there? Well, I've always loved the water. I was a waterfront director and lifeguard, and I've always loved the water, diver and what have you. So, in the wintertime, I always tried to get away to the Caribbean. And it was first to St. Martin, and then it ended up being Anguilla. And as my business grew, my secretary would kick me out on December 15th because we couldn't really do anything else and have it ready. And she'd say, she was a German gal. She'd say, I'll call you when it's time to come back, And I'd get down there, and after about 3 weeks, I go, okay, you ready for me to come back? She goes, no. She said, I've got a lot of work cleaning up and getting ready for the next season. And we did a big wedding business. I had 3 photographers that photographed weddings for me. We did some very, very big weddings.
Wow.
Okay. We were a very carriage straight studio, again, because our reputation, they knew we were going to be there and do a good job. And so as I kept going down to the Caribbean, needless to say, I kept loving it. And then I ended up starting to sail, and I fell in love with that. And so at 48, I basically pretty much retired, semi-retired. I had a 6,000 square foot contemporary home in Connecticut, right outside the Mystic area. And that's where my studio was and what have you. And so I ended up, would leave and go down to the Caribbean, and it became longer and no, don't come back. And when you have your first she'd call me back for a big commercial job, but otherwise, I'd get to stay down there for a while. And so that's basically how it came about.
And then a hurricane.
Well, no, then I was sailing for several years. Okay. And Anguilla was really my favorite island. I sailed all through the BVIs and down through the Grenadines and over to Puerto La Cruz, Venezuela, and stuff like that. Some interesting stories with that as well. But basically, is what happened was I lost all my dough in the stock market in a Madoff deal.
Okay.
And consequently, I was like, okay, I got to do something. So I ended up starting Anguilla Memories in Anguilla. And that's kind of how this hat came about. I used to wear sailing, and it became a brand in Anguilla because the people would say, they would say, I want to see the artwork from the guy with the cowboy. And my friends in the island would say, we're going to steal that hat, Rusell. And I said, you can't steal it. I said, I'm the only one. I was the only person out of 16,000 people that had a cowboy hat.
Right.
And I said, you can't wear it. You can't get it off the island.
Yeah.
And they go, you bastard. I go, well, I'm sorry. So it became a brand there.
There you go.
And so work on the other brand, I had a black and white English Springer Spaniel. And I've had 4 of them in my life, and all of them has just been wonderful dogs.
Right.
I mean, just very easygoing and what have you. And so the island people treat their dogs a little bit differently than we do in America. And so she became on Rin Tin Tin. I went down to the high school to talk about art and painting and stuff. And I never talked a word about painting and art. They were all fascinated with my dog. When I walked in, they all ran to the corner and say, does she bite? Does she bite? And I'm going,
not my dog.
I said, give her a command. And by the time I left, that's all they wanted to do was pet my dog. And then we'd be down at the beach. And of course, she could run anywhere. And she would actually jump in the water and come out with a fish.
Right.
Okay.
It's a good trick.
And they loved to play with her and what have you. So, and she saved my life.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting story as well.
Wow.
So let's fast forward from being in that wonderful location,
Yeah.
and now you're in Scottsdale. And
Yeah.
in the time we have left, I want to make sure we
yeah.
get a chance to connect with your life in Scottsdale here too. I'm curious because you found, all the talent you've had as a photojournalist and a photographer, you started blending with technology. Kevin, you're a technology guy,
Yeah.
so talk about creative ways that we can do things that we never really thought of before with technology. And you discovered a niche there with that was able to blend your career with technology into something that sounds like it's pretty darn special now.
Yeah, it is. And young people especially, okay, this is an area that's wide open in the fact that in one respect, art has become kind of a commodity, okay? But in the other, that it's so creative now between what you can do. I mean, I've got software programs that I I can paint and I can change it. And you know, the new Photoshop came out, and for me at my age, it's somewhat difficult because when these things change, they can change so drastically that it's like going back to college again. And so but so it's kind of a love-hate relationship. I love what I can do with it, but I hate the fact of how much time I have to spend doing it sometimes.
To learn it too, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what brought you to Scottsdale? Because you could have gone to Palm Springs or Santa Fe
Well,
or
because I've been coming to Scottsdale for quite a while.
okay.
One of the things that obviously you've got great weather here and
Yeah.
great art. So I came here on vacation in between the Caribbean, and I just loved it. The people were friendly. It's a nice place. And so we would get off the island once a year, because from about May until, let's say, October, November, the galleries are closed. I'm not going to sell a lot of my artwork. There's really
Mhm.
nothing going on. The golf courses, I love to play golf. So the golf course closed down, and it's like, Scottsdale's known for golf, right?
That's the last
So,
last act there. Forget it, man. Golf
yeah.
courses closed down. It's
So,
over.
so I ended up coming here, and during the summer, and I would come here before that, and just to come. And I said, "Gee, it's a great vacation place." And I said, so when we were at the island, we had to get our teeth done and medical stuff and what have you. So we'd come here, great doctors. So we'd come here and get that done, and
Right.
then obviously, most logical choice, when the hurricane came, we had to get off the island. It's like, okay, let's go to
Where are we
Scottsdale.
going? Right. Right.
And so after the hurricane, our place was so devastated, and they didn't have electricity for almost 4.5, 5 months out to
Whoa.
our home.
Wow.
Okay, where our residence was.
Yeah.
So I had friends of mine that would check, and they'd say, Kirk, everything is green. There's just nothing that's
Yeah.
salvageable. So, we ended up staying here. I never went back after the hurricane.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so
Okay.
we've been here pretty much ever since.
Did you ride the hurricane out? Were you there when the hurricane hit?
No, actually we weren't. We got out.
That's good. Yeah. Well, that's
Yeah.
probably smart, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So how's your setup in Scottsdale? Where do we find your work? How do you do your business here?
I do a lot of the Thunderbird shows.
Mhm.
I've done those
Okay.
before.
Yeah, I've seen those.
I
Yeah.
do a lot of the smaller shows as well.
Mhm.
I haven't really connected with a gallery. I would kind of like to, but I've heard good and bad things about galleries.
Mhm.
And so I haven't really pursued that amount, in the fact that, I'm selling my work,
Mhm.
and I don't have to give somebody 50%, number
Yeah.
one. And number two, my clients like it because they're not paying the exorbitant prices.
Yeah, the markup.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I pretty much say to somebody, if you can think it, I can create it. So whether it's a painting of somebody's antique
Mhm.
automobile, or their pet, or something along those lines, the technology is there, and I'm lucky enough to be able to go in all those directions to pull something together that most people enjoy.
That's pretty cool. So do you go to some of the there's a ton of festivals during the season, Fountain
Yeah.
Hills and
Yes.
Tempe,
Yes.
all over the place.
Yep.
You end up setting up shop there?
I do. I have in the past. As I'm getting older, it's becoming a little bit more difficult for me to put up the tent and handle stuff and what have you. And
the long hours probably too, right?
Yes, and it's a really hit and miss because they're very expensive. I mean, by the time you get done doing a show, it's $700.
All right.
And so consequently, you've got to sell a lot of fine art cards
just to break even.
And some artwork. So, and if you get bad weather, I remember the first show I did, it was kind of bad weather for a day and a half, and the wind came in, and guys' tents were blowing all over the place, and this artwork was all over the pavement. So you got to take that into consideration. So, I still do some from time to time, but I'm pretty selective.
I see. Now we're going to have some of your images on the YouTube channel that people can see. It's beautiful stuff.
Thank you.
I noticed that a lot of the stuff though it's Western art, but there are not a lot of desert type things like that. Are you still working on that kind of stuff? Or
yeah, I do. That card right there is an example. I've got some quite a bit here. I do. This is some Indian adobe houses here.
Now, would that be New Mexico, or would that be,
no,
is that taken in Arizona?
Yeah, and then, different types of, So I have quite a bit of, here's another piece that's a popular seller.
Right.
And the other thing that these cards I do has a nice bio on the back, and it's very popular in the fact that if you go to get a card to say thank you to somebody or pay a check or somebody's in the hospital or what have you, you go to Safeway or someplace else, it's $11 for a fine art card, and they're not very good.
Right.
Whereas I sell these for, $6 a piece, and if they buy a quantity, it turns out to be like $5 each. And you just can't get anything like that. And these are all frameable pieces. So I find that I get more orders, I get as many orders from people that receive one and say, I really enjoyed this. I got it when I did some work, or they paid me with this fine art card, and I like your bio. Can I get some to pass out to my friends? Because, if you're in business, there are times that, oh, geez, I got to stop and get a get well card. I got to stop and get a card to say thank you or an anniversary or what have you. Whereas if you buy 4 or 6 of these, you throw them in the drawer.
Yeah.
And whenever you need one,
handy when needed,
it's there.
Yeah, there you go.
So
how do people find you? You got a website? Or,
yep. Buywesternart.com.
Buywesternart.com. Okay.
Good
to know.
Is the website.
Yeah. So people can go there. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm trying to get it. In fact, I haven't had it redone. I'm trying to get it redone. I've got a whole lot of new work that isn't even on my website.
Oh, really?
And I'm trying to get somebody to redo it for me. So I'm in the process of
redoing
redoing
it. What do you mean? Redo the website or redo the...
No, redo my website.
Okay.
Yeah, it's got to be, I have to have more of my work out.
Yeah.
And I've got much more than's on there. And I'm going to, because I haven't changed it in like 8-9 years.
Well, there's a town for that. Lots of town can do that for you, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So I'm a fan of some of the arts organizations right now, and the Sonoran Arts League comes to mind. Are you part of that? They do that program called Hidden in the Hills every Thanksgiving weekend and the weekend before.
Yes, very familiar with it. I have not. I actually tried to participate.
Did you? Yeah.
In that, and it was kind of taken up. They kind of have I don't want to say a cliquish group there, but it's people that have kind of done it for years, and they know the people's homes and what have you.
Yeah.
So. Not that I would be opposed to doing it, certainly.
Right. Yeah.
So just want to keep people give an eye out so people can find your stuff when they get a chance.
Yeah, and I appreciate that.
Yeah,
it's beautiful work.
Yeah, it sure is.
Thank you so much.
And thanks for coming down and spending some time with us today. You have a fascinating story. Love chatting with you. We could go on for hours, but we're at our 30-minute sweet spot. So
we're going to turn the cameras off here in a second, but I'm sure we're going to stay for a little while longer and hear some more stories about the cowboy hat and stuff.
Well, thank you so much for having me down.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, great conversation. Love the work you're doing. The samples we saw today are just terrific. And what's the website again?
Buywesternart.com.
There you go.
That's BUY. Westernart.com.
There you go. So I just encourage people to check it out. I know I'll be doing that when I get off the air with this one, and fantastic deal. So thanks for being with us. And thanks to all of you for listening. I hope you'll continue to share our podcasts with your friends and tune in for the next episode of Today and Tomorrow in Scottsdale.